Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, May the 2nd. Welcome to the month of May. Believe it or not, we're 6 months away now from the midterms. And we're going to get into a lot about the midterms and a lot about the political climate in the country when we chat later today with our friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. You know, we do that every Monday. We touch base with Bill and we look at the events of the week. And one of the big ones, of course, is what's happening to the polling data of President Biden and the Democrats. And if you're a Democrat, you have to be concerned. For example, specifically, you now have a Democrat in New Hampshire, the lady who's running for reelection up in New Hampshire, and she is moving as far away from President Biden, not just on the situation on the border, but on the gasoline situation, the economic situation. I mean, she's basically calling for an increase in energy production in the United States, which, of course, has been the position of the Republicans to bring back energy and, in essence, lower prices by increasing production. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see how Democrats are starting to develop a distance from President Biden. And when you look at the polling data, you can certainly understand that. I mean, I think we're now in a situation where it's sort of the law of the jungle. Everybody's out to protect themselves, and I think you'll see more and more Democrats take very critical positions of President Biden over the next few months. I mean, that's just the way it goes. You got to save your job. And in this case, if you're the Hampshire and you are already in a very tough reelection, remember, she was elected by, I think, by a couple thousand votes. It was a very close election. So she was always one of those Democrats who was potentially vulnerable for reelection. And yes, she is right now, and she's running away from Joe Biden as fast as she can. So we'll get into that story with Bill, as well as President Biden at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where, you know, I thought he wasn't even funny. That's the sad thing about this. I mean, the White House dinner is kind of where the president goes in and makes fun of himself. But it seemed like, you know, he was saying some things about the Republicans and about his predecessor, as he likes to call him, that were, frankly, I thought, a bit out of line. So I think it shows actually the hysterical, and frankly, they're frightened. I think a lot of Democrats are frightened by what's coming in November, and they're trying to get their base out. And that's why all they do is talk about Trump. Well, I have an article coming out Tuesday morning where I talk about what is happening in public education. You know, we've had in the past guests, and we've had discussions on the video as well as the podcast about the future of public education. And right now, the future of public education is a bit uncertain. There are many school districts who are losing kids. Houston, for example, has lost a bunch of kids. You got a lot of other areas, and they're losing a lot of kids. And where are these kids going? Well, most of them are staying home for homeschooling. Some are going to private schools. Catholic schools have become very popular. It's a popular alternative. But I think a lot of them are just staying home and they're doing homeschooling. And a lot of people are saying, why is that happening? Well, it's happening because there is a great dissatisfaction between the parents and public schools, the way they are right now. Not public schools as an institution, but the way public schools are being run right now. I think there's a great dissatisfaction. Who I think feel like they're paying a lot of money for these public schools, and these public schools are not living up to the standards. So this is an amazing story because, as we will discuss with Bill later on when we do our podcast, I think this is going to be one of the driving issues in the midterms. I think you're going to see mom and dad vote in huge numbers in the midterms, and their votes are going to be in favor of school choice for the most part. And you're going to see more and more states move in that direction, in the direction of school choice, which, of course, there's different ways of explaining school choice. Usually the most popular way to explain it is to say you give the money to the family and let the family choose the school, rather than to tell the parents you have to go to the school in your neighborhood and that's your only option other than a private school. So this is coming. And it's coming, I think, because a lot of parents are very dissatisfied with what's happening in public schools. So keep an eye on that issue. I think it's going to be a driving issue in the upcoming midterms. Well, we had some bad news about the American economy on Thursday and Friday. The GDP was negative for the first quarter. Now, technically, when you have a negative GDP for two consecutive quarters, you have technically a recession. That's what economists call a recession. That's the technical definition of a recession. But I think even many economists were very surprised with the GDP dropped in the first quarter. I think there was a sense of, hey, that was unexpected. Now, there are some numbers within the numbers that may suggest that this may have been an aberration rather than the beginning of a recession. We'll have to wait until the next numbers, frankly, to see that. But one way or another, politically speaking, it's always very difficult for an administration when the GDP growth is negative. And when you go from like 6 to -1, that is a big problem for the administration in power. And unfortunately, that administration right now is the Biden administration. So we'll get into that with Bill today. Let me close with a little bit of on this day in history. It was on this day in 1939 that Lou Gehrig, the great player with the Yankees, took himself out of the lineup. Lou had been not feeling well for most of spring training and most of the early session of the 1939 season. So he had also played in 2,130 consecutive games, which at the time was the record by a long shot. And he went to see the manager of the Yankees and said, I just can't do this anymore. So he took him out of the lineup. He was then sent to a hospital in Minneapolis, where they obviously discovered that he had what came to be known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And Lou Gehrig never played again. He never played again. And he died 2 years later in New York City. So Lou Gehrig, the end of the streak, was on this day in 1939. If you want to see, I always recommend this movie, Pride of the Yankees. Pride of the Yankees, the movie, I believe, from the 1940s. Still my favorite baseball movie because it's such an amazing movie. I think Gary Cooper plays Lou Gehrig in that movie, but just an amazing movie, Pride of the Yankees. And you can see a little bit of the story toward the end of the movie. And of course, everything sort of pointing to July 4th, 1939, when he was given his farewell at Yankee Stadium. He had retired by now. He retired a couple of months after he quit playing. And it was on that day, July 4th, 1939, that he uttered those famous words, I am the luckiest man on the face of the earth. And of course, that's how he felt, and Lou Gehrig, I always remember Lou Gehrig fondly. I don't know what about, I never saw him play, obviously. And he did play with Babe Ruth all that time. But I always thought of Lou Gehrig as the definition of the Yankees. And that is what he was always to me. Pride of the Yankees. Watch that movie, Gary Cooper playing Lou Gehrig. Well, we'll catch up with you again later today on Monday on the Weekend Review with Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Today being the first day of May, I got my calendar. My calendar behind me is actually on the right month. Sometimes I've done this and forgotten to change the calendar, but not today. I got it on the month of May. Bye-bye, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.